Oradour-sur-Glane is a commune in the Haute-Vienne department in the Limousin region in west-central France. The original population was destroyed on June 10, 1944, when 642 of its inhabitants, including women and children, were massacred by a German Waffen-SS company. A new village was built after the war on a nearby site but on the orders of the then French President, Charles de Gaulle. The original has been maintained as a permanent memorial and museum. History: World War II. In February 1944, 2nd SS Panzer Division was stationed in the southern French town of Valence-Dagen, north of Toulouse, waiting to be resupplied with new equipment and freshly trained troops. After the D-Day invasion of Normandy, the division was ordered to make its way across the country to stop the Allied advance. One of the division's units was the 4th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment. Its staff included SS Standartenführer 1 Quarter Sylvester Stageler as regimental commander, SS Sturmbannführer 1 Quarter Adolf Deichmann as commander of the regiment's 1st Battalion and SS Sturmbannführer 1 Quarter Otto Wedinger, who was designated Stageler's successor as regimental commander and was with the regiment for familiarization purposes. Command of Der Führer 1 Quarter passed from Stageler to Wedinger on June 14. Early on the morning of June 10, 1944, Deichmann informed Wedinger at regimental headquarters that he had been approached by two members of the Milice, a paramilitary force belonging to the Vichy regime. They claimed that a Waffen-SS officer was being held by the resistance in Oradour-sur-Glane, a nearby village. The captured German was alleged to be SS Sturmbannführer 1 Quarter Helmut Karkarency MPFE, commander of the 2nd SS Panzer Reconnaissance Battalion, who may have been captured by the Maquis du Limousin the day before. Massacre: On June 10, Deichmann's battalion sealed off Oradour-sur-Glane and ordered all the townsfolk and anyone who happened to be in or near the town to assemble in the village square, ostensibly to have their identity papers examined. In addition to the residents of the village, the SS also apprehended 6 people who did not live there but had the misfortune to be riding their bikes through the village when the Germans arrived. All the women and children were locked in the church while the village was looted. Meanwhile, the men were led to 6 barns and sheds where machine guns were already in place. According to the account of a survivor, the soldiers began shooting at them, aiming for their legs so that they would die slowly. Once the victims were no longer able to move, the soldiers covered their bodies with fuel and set the barns on fire. Only 6 men escaped. One of them was later seen walking down a road heading for the cemetery and was shot dead. In all, 190 men perished. The soldiers proceeded to the church and placed an incendiary device there. After it was ignited, women and children tried to escape through the doors and windows of the church, but they were met with machine gun fire. A total of 247 women and 205 children died in the carnage. Only 47-year-old Marguerite Rufange survived. She slid out by a rear sacristy window, followed by a young woman and child. All 3 were shot. Marguerite Rufange was wounded and her companions were killed. She crawled to some pea bushes behind the church, where she remained hidden overnight until she was rescued the following morning. Another group of about 20 villagers had fled Oradour-sur-Glane as soon as the soldiers had appeared. That night, the village was partially razed. Through a Freedom of Information Act request, the formal written narrative of a 20-year-old American B-17 Navigator shot down over Avard, France in late April, 1944 and thereafter hidden by the French resistance until he was finally flown to England on August 6, 1944. A was obtained in 2011. The report includes the following handwritten notation, dated August 15, 1944, "About 3 weeks ago, I saw a town within 4 hours bicycle ride up the Gerbeau farm where some 500 men, women, and children had been murdered by the Germans. I saw one baby who had been crucified." Although Murphy's 2-sentence addition to his report is, apparently, the first evidence in the historical record of the infliction of cruelty of that sort on a baby, based on an assemblage of evidence undertaken in large part by Murphy's grandson, an attorney in the National Security Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. There is little reason to doubt the authenticity of the handwritten addition to the formal account of the 4.5 months in which Lieutenant Murphy evaded capture. A document that had gone through a number of drafts between the filing of Murphy's initial questionnaire on August 7 and the execution of the formal report on August 15, as the report was compiled and edited by an intelligence officer, formally witnessed and signed off by a commanding officer, with each successive draft and its interlineations included in the PDF file cited by Harris in the Foreign Policy article. And as Harris sets forth, the weight of circumstantial evidence strongly points to the identity of the town in issue as Oradour-sur-Glane. A few days later, survivors were allowed to bury the dead. 642 inhabitants of Oradour-sur-Glane had been murdered in a matter of hours. Adolf Deichmann claimed that the episode was a just retaliation for partisan activity in nearby Tyrol and the kidnapping of Helmut Karkarency MPFE. Aftermath. On January 12, 1953, a military tribunal in Bordeaux heard the case against the surviving 65 of the approximately 200 German soldiers who had been involved. Only 21 of them were present, as many were living in East Germany, which would not allow them to be extradited. 7 of them were Germans, but 14 were Alsatians, French nationals of German ethnicity who had been regarded by the Nazis as members of the Reich. All but one of them claimed to have been drafted into the Waffen-SS by force. Such forced conscripts from Alsace and Lorraine called themselves the Malgré Copyright-Naus, meaning against our will. The trial caused a huge protest in Alsace, forcing the French authorities to split the tribunal into 2 separate proceedings, according to the nationality of the defendants. On February 11, 20 defendants were found guilty. Continuing uproar in Alsace pressed the French Parliament to pass an amnesty law for all the Malgré Copyright-Naus on February 19, and the convicted Alsatians were released shortly afterwards. This, in turn, caused bitter protests in the Limousin region. By 1958, all the German defendants had been released as well. General Heinz Lemerding of the Das Reich Division, who had given the orders for the measures against the resistance, died in 1971 after a successful entrepreneurial career. At the time of the trial he lived in Darwin-Courteseldorf, which was located inside the British occupation zone of West Germany, and the French government never obtained his extradition from the British authorities. The last trial against a former Waffen-SS member took place in 1983. Shortly before, former SS Obersturmführer One-Quarter Heinz Barth was tracked down in the German Democratic Republic. Barth participated in the Oradour-sur-Glane massacre as a platoon leader in the Der Far One-Quarter Regiment, in charge of 45 soldiers. He was one of several war criminals charged with giving orders to shoot 20 men in a garage. Barth was sentenced to life imprisonment by the First Senate of the City Court of Berlin. He was released from prison in the reunified Germany in 1997, and he died in August 2007. After the war, General Charles de Gaulle decided the village should never be rebuilt, but would remain a memorial to the cruelty of the Nazi occupation. Modern days. The new village of Oradour-sur-Glane, northwest of the site of the massacre, was built after the war. The ruins of the original village remain as a memorial to the dead and to represent similar sites and events. In 1999 French President Jacques Chirac dedicated a memorial museum, the Centre de la Mort Copyright Moi d'Orador, near the entrance to the village martyr. Its museum includes items recovered from the burned-out buildings, watches stopped at the time their owners were burned alive, glasses melted from the intense heat, and various personal items. On June 6, 2004, at the commemorative ceremony of the Normandy invasion in Caen, German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder pledged that Germany would not forget the Nazi atrocities and specifically mentioned Oradour-sur-Glane. On September 4, 2013, German President Joachim Gauck and French President François Hollande visited the ghost village of Oradour-sur-Glane. A joint news conference broadcast by the two leaders followed their tour of the site. This was the first time a German president had come to the site of one of the biggest World War II massacres on French soil. On January 8, 2014, an 88-year-old former member of the 3rd Company of the 1st Battalion of the Der Führer SS Regiment was charged, by the state court in Cologne, with 25 charges of murder and hundreds of counts of accessory to murder in connection with the massacre in Oradour-sur-Glane. The suspect, who was identified only as Werner C., has until March 31, 2014 to respond to the charges. If the case does go to trial, it will possibly be held in a juvenile court because the suspect was only 19 at the time. According to his attorney, Rainer Pohlen, the suspect acknowledges being at the village but denies being involved in any killings. Analysis: Deichmann's conduct. Upon entering Oradour-sur-Glane, SS Sturmbannführer 1 Quartier Deichmann had received orders from his regimental commander, SS Standartenführer 1 Quartier Stadler, to only have the mayor of the town name 30 people who could serve as hostages in exchange for SS Sturmbannführer 1 Quartier car currency MPFE. However, Deichmann instead ordered the population exterminated and the village burned to the ground. Protests followed from General Field Marshal Owen Rommel, General Gleiniger, German commander in Limoges, and the Vichy government. SS Standartenführer 1 Quartier Stadler felt Deichmann had far exceeded his orders and began a judicial investigation. Deichmann, 29 years old, was killed in action shortly afterwards during the Battle of Normandy, and a large number of the 3rd Company, which had committed the massacre, were themselves killed in action within a few days, and the investigation was suspended. German attitudes to resistance. The massacre at Oradour-sur-Glane involved men, women and children, some as young as 1 week, and some as old as 90. Oradour-sur-Glane was not the only collective punishment reprisal action committed by the Waffen-SS. Other well-documented examples include the French towns of Tulle, ASCQ, Mala Copyright, Robert E. Spain, and Clermont-en-Argonne. The Polish villages Michniaków W, Wanity and Krasowokz are in registered trademark STKI. The Soviet village of Kortelisy. The Lithuanian village of Pyra-Upie. The Czechoslovakian villages of Li 3/4 AKY and Lidis. The Greek towns of Kalavryta and Istomo. The Dutch town of Putten. The Yugoslavian towns of Kragujevac and Kraljevo and in the village of Drilla 3/4 Goa EA. The Norwegian village of Taloviengi. The Italian villages of Sant'Anna di Stazzema and Martisaboto. On Friday 13 April 1945, in Germany itself, Waffen-SS along with troops from the Luftwaffe and the Hitlerjugend, placed 1,000 to 1,100 political prisoners in transit from the Dora Mittelbay concentration camp into a barn in the town of Garda-Legen, set it afire and machine-gunned anyone who tried to escape. Furthermore, the Waffen-SS executed hostages throughout France as a deterrent to resistance. Village population. In popular culture, television, the story of Oradour-sur-Glane was featured in 1974 in the noted British documentary television series The World at War, which was narrated by Sir Laurence Olivier. The first and final episodes show helicopter views of the destroyed village, interspersed with pictures of the victims that appear on their graves. Episodes 1 and 26 both started with the words, "Down this road, on a summer day in 1944. The soldiers came. Nobody lives here now. They stayed only a few hours. When they had gone, the community which had lived for 1,000 years was dead. This is Oradour-sur-Glane, in France. The day the soldiers came, the people were gathered together. The men were taken to garages and barns, the women and children were led down this road and they were driven into this church. Here, they heard the firing as their men were shot. Then, they were killed too. A few weeks later, many of those who had done the killing were themselves dead, in battle. They never rebuilt Oradour. Its ruins are a memorial. Its martyrdom stands for thousands upon thousands of other martyrdoms in Poland, in Russia, in Burma, in China, in a world at war." And at the end of episode 26, while another aerial shot of the village ruins plus photos of various massacre victims were being shown to the accompaniment of dramatic and moving music, which is taken from the St. Nicholas Mass by Haydn, Olivier said. At the village of Oradour-sur-Glane, the day the soldiers came, they killed more than 600 men, women and children. Remember. This is also referenced in the 2010 series World War II in color in the episode Overlord, which aired on January 7, 2010. Film. A feature film, Oradour, was released in September 2011 in France. The 1975 French film Le Vieux Fusil is based on these facts. Literature. The poet Gillian Clarke, national poet for Wales, commemorates the massacre at Oradour-sur-Glane in two poems from her 2009 collection A Recipe for Water, Oradour-sur-Glane and Singer. In the Dark Horse Comics Grendel Tales miniseries The Devil's Hammer, 5 Grendel Knights massacre and horribly mutilate all but 2 of the inhabitants of a town named Oradour, possibly in homage to Oradour-sur-Glane. A novel A High and Hidden Place, by Michelle Claire Lucas, is the story of a young woman's search for her family, lost at the massacre. HarperCollins publishes 2005, Music. In the video for The Streets the Escapist, Mike Skinner is briefly seen walking through the destroyed village of Oradour-sur-Glane. A photo of a wrecked car in the village is the basis of the cover of the album Tokka Operi by the Russian group Skafund and Vayavi from Kirpiki. Band Silent Planet has a song entitled Tiny Hands, which was written about the event. Gallery. See also. References, Notes. Bibliography, Farmer, Sarah. Martyred Village, commemorating the 1944 massacre at Oradour-sur-Glane. University of California Press, 2000. Voucher copyright, Jean-Jacques. Massacre at Oradour, France, 1944. Coming to Grips with Terror, Northern Illinois University Press, 2004. INSEE, Pinard, Guy. La Das Reich to ESS Panzer Division, a Permilditions de la Laws par copyright Rigua. ISBN 2-912032-76-8, external links, study of 1944 reprisals at Oradour-sur-Glane, Oradour-sur-Glane Memorial Centre, full list of casualties, souvenir a movie based on the events at Oradour-sur-Glane, Le Vieux Fusil another movie based on these events, account containing witness testimony.